So last night, my wife of 7 years decided she needed a relaxing evening. After dinner, she headed to the den to watch her favorite shows, while I bounced between the Spurs football match and tackling a few tasks I had on my to-do list. Next thing I know, she's cracked open 2 bottles of wine. Around midnight, I went to check on her and found her passed out on the couch. As I was about to pick her up, her iWatch buzzed, and a message appeared on the screen. It read something like, "Haha, I can't do that, my name would knock 7 shades of shit out of me." Curious about what that was all about, I tapped on it and discovered a conversation between my wife and a friend of mine. Now, I wouldn't say this guy is a close buddy, but he's someone I've played five-a-side with for years, shared drinks with, and known since our teenage days. We used to call him Jacket Holder, because whenever we got into scrapes as teens, he'd be the one holding the jackets while everyone else threw punches. Anyway, I tapped on the conversation while the watch was still on her wrist and scrolled to the top. It seemed like he was the one who reached out first, unless she's deleted messages. There was a lot of flirting and wink-winking, but nothing that screamed outright cheating. Then, when I got to last night's messages, I was floored. She was drunkenly begging him for sex, and I couldn't believe my eyes. I'm paraphrasing here since I don't remember the exact words, but she was talking about how much she had always wanted him, how no one would find out if they hooked up, and the one that really hit me hard, that she was great at keeping secrets. I tried to scroll further on her watch but couldn't find any more messages, and I don't know her phone passcode. I tucked her into bed and sat in the kitchen, stunned, until I eventually fell asleep. I got up for work around 5:30 a.m., but when I went to get into my van, I just slumped down on the wheel, realizing I couldn't face it. So I went back inside, grabbed a half-empty bottle of vodka mixed with Coke, and took a walk down the old railway line beside our house. I've walked about half the length of it, and am now sitting under a railway bridge like some kind of miserable troll, just seething. You'd probably think there was a fire nearby from the steam coming out of my ears. So what's my move now? I can't even stand the idea of talking to her, let alone looking at her after seeing those messages. It felt like a dagger to my heart. It's like every shred of love I had for her evaporated into thin air once I read her desperate pleas. It's absolutely revolting. Honestly, I'd like nothing more than to ghost her. If it were entirely up to me, I'd cut off all contact and never speak to her again. The part where she said she was great at keeping secrets really tore me up. Who even is she now? It's a disgusting situation, and it's got me wondering just how deep this rabbit hole goes, and whether I even want to dig further. I'm not holding back here. I'm just done. I've never experienced such profound betrayal and revulsion in my entire life. I invested so much in her, not just as a partner, but as a person. I loved her with all my heart, and genuinely believed that our personalities and values reflected that we were good, decent people. To discover that she's been a backstabbing snake makes me feel utterly deceived. It's like finding out someone you looked up to, trusted, and took life advice from was hiding a monstrous secret. It completely shatters your sense of self and who you thought you were. It feels like I've been deceived and manipulated into being someone I never thought I'd become. I know I'm rambling, and I apologize if this is all over the place. On the plus side, at least our house is in my family's name. My parents moved to a retirement village 6 years ago, and we took over the house. The plan is for the house to be passed down to me when they eventually pass away. So if we get divorced, she won't be able to lay claim to it. It's a small relief in the midst of all this chaos. So, what's my next step? I'm seriously contemplating just shutting her out completely without a word. While I was walking, I even considered having a friend of mine who's a locksmith change the locks today. I could come up with some excuse about needing repairs on the doors. She won't care about the details as long as I'm around. Once the locks are changed, I'd lock the front door and then tell her to step outside to look at something in the back. When she goes out, I'd slip back inside and lock the door behind me. Sounds petty and childish, doesn't it? But honestly, I'm at a loss here, staring at a bottle of vodka, feeling like my entire world has been ripped apart. As for that so-called friend of mine, there's no doubt in my mind that he was up to something. I wouldn't have discovered any of this if I hadn't seen that message, so I plan on confronting him soon. Jacket holder or not, he'll be dealing with a whole lot more than just holding jackets once I'm through with him. So, while I was sitting there, clearly in distress, 2 dog walkers came over to check on me. I told them everything that had happened, and one of them said, "Son, the worst thing you can do right now is drink." It'll just make everything worse. I'm really grateful for that advice because, at that moment, I was heading straight for a meltdown. I threw the vodka away, reached out to a friend, and he offered me a place to stay for a while to calm down. He was at work, but gave me the location of his spare key. We live in a small town of about 15,000 people, so it wasn't too far away. Once I got to his place, I just sank onto his couch, trying to get my head together. Throughout the morning, my phone was blowing up with texts and calls from my wife, wondering where I was since my work van was still in the driveway and I was nowhere to be found. I texted her back, saying there was a problem with the engine and I had to get a lift to work, which seemed to satisfy her. She simply replied with an "okay." When my friend got home around 5 o'clock, I filled him in on everything that had gone down and asked for his advice. I also requested that he keep quiet about jacket holder for now, as I didn't want that getting back to my wife. I planned to deal with him later by exposing what a little rat he is. Beating him up doesn't solve anything right now. And for anyone thinking he did nothing wrong, let me be clear. He reached out to my wife first and was extremely flirty. What was he even doing messaging her in the first place? He barely knows her, only from seeing her around. I've got no issue with two adults talking, but their interactions were flirty from the get-go, which seems fishy to me. I suspect they've seen each other around, and it turned flirtatious. My friend advised me to lay low and gather more information, while also consulting a lawyer to explore my options, which I did today. He took me back home around 6 o'clock, and by then I was completely wiped out. The adrenaline from the entire day had drained me, and I felt utterly exhausted when I finally got home. The moment I walked through the door, I knew something was off. My wife pounced on me immediately, bombarding me with questions about work. I asked her why she even cared, and she said I'd left my big flask and lunch bag in the front passenger seat, and that she had a gut feeling something was wrong today. I was about to fabricate a story, but I was too exhausted to bother with any kind of pretense. I simply told her that, yes, something was up. I admitted that while I was putting her drunken self to bed last night, a message popped up on her iWatch. I read it, along with all the others, and found out she's a fucking disgusting cheat who I want nothing more to do with. Her face shifted instantly from a self-assured stance to that of a scared little girl. Good at keeping secrets, huh? Begging that little rat for sex, eh? Yep, I read it all. She started to sob uncontrollably, and I just walked away and went upstairs to take a shower. When I came back down, she was sitting on the top stair, still crying, and the excuses started pouring out. She claimed she was drunk, vulnerable, that she'd never done anything like that before, that he had messaged her first, and it didn't mean anything, that she was never going to go through with it. It was like she had a script of every excuse I'd heard people predict she'd use. The only thing she didn't try was to blame me, probably because she knew I'd kick her out immediately if she attempted that. I told her straight up that I wanted a divorce and that she needed to move out within a month. I also informed her that she was to move to the spare room. Since then, I've been mostly ignoring her, just giving her dirty looks and shaking my head whenever she starts spewing nonsense. I'm not interested in hearing it. She spent the night in the spare room, and I haven't communicated with her at all today. If I'm lucky, she might be gone by the time I get home from work, though I doubt my luck will be that good. In the meantime, I updated my parents on what's been happening, and my mother was adamant that I shouldn't just throw her out on the streets. She and my wife have always been close. We've been together for almost 11 years, and my mother was insisting that we should sort this out like adults. She even argued that my wife didn't actually do anything wrong. It was just words. I couldn't believe it. She completely took her side over mine. Can this really screw me over? Do I not have the right to ask her to leave if my mother is against it? It's my house after all, and it'll be mine when my parents pass. I've done nothing wrong, so I'm not leaving. It's probably going to turn into a real battle, like War of the Roses Part 2. I managed to secure an appointment with a divorce lawyer for next week to discuss my options. Until then, I guess I'll continue to ignore my soon-to-be ex-wife. I'm pretty sure she won't admit to anything more now. I'll never know if she was a really good liar or if she was just trying to butter up her little rat friend to set up an affair. It's been 20 days since I discovered my wife was trying to cheat on me with my friend, and things have only gotten worse. I gave her a month to move out, and although she's been staying in the spare room, it's become clear she has no real intention of leaving. She's even managed to sway my mother to her side. She has nowhere else to go, but that's not my concern. I've met with my divorce lawyer several times now, and am in the process of drafting a divorce petition and preparing to serve her the papers. I've also opened my own bank account and withdrawn 50% of the balance from our joint account. The atmosphere at home has turned incredibly tense. The living room has become a no man's land, with neither of us spending any time there. We both stay holed up in our rooms, and I've been working late on purpose to avoid interacting with her as much as possible. Initially, I was completely ignoring her, but after reading about the 180 technique, I've started being civil, though still a bit cold. I'm glad I made this change because I was starting to feel like a monster for refusing to acknowledge her existence. It felt wrong and made me feel like I was the one who had done something wrong, rather than her. The only time I broke from this approach was last week when I walked into the bathroom and found her sitting on the floor by the bath, crying. I helped her up and gave her a hug, though it was more of a there type of hug rather than one filled with affection. The sad part is, I'm now so suspicious of her that I wouldn't put it past her to have been staging a performance just to get my sympathy. It's probably not even true, but this is the kind of toxic environment I'm dealing with right now. She's been going on and on about how she'll do anything to save the marriage, to prove it was just a silly mistake. So I suggested a lie detector test. I don't actually plan to get one done. I wouldn't even know where to start. I just wanted to see her reaction. At first, she was all for it, but a few hours later, she came to me with a tablet, arguing that lie detectors are inaccurate and that anxiety and nervousness can produce false results, especially with her anxiety disorder. I just laughed, not a normal laugh, but a full-on cackle that turned into a childish giggle. So she's willing to do anything to save our marriage, except take a lie detector test. Interesting. In any case, it doesn't even matter anymore. As I mentioned before, every ounce of love I had for her vanished the moment I read those horrible messages. I no longer see her as my true love, the person I could confide in and trust with my life. Now she's just trash. Something that needs to be removed before it starts to stink up the place. Since I exposed Jacket Holder to our friend group a few weeks ago, he's become the talk of the town. It's clear he's lost all his friends and has been completely ostracized. I tried calling him several times, but he ignored my calls and eventually blocked my number. I hope that little rat feels it was worth it, though it doesn't change what he did. I've had numerous conversations with my mother about this whole situation, and during one particularly heated argument, I demanded to know why she was taking my wife's side. Was there something she wasn't telling me? Did she seriously expect us to just live together as if nothing had happened? It's absolutely ridiculous. She told me she has always seen my wife as the daughter she never had. My mother lost a daughter in a stillbirth before I was born, and it's haunted her ever since. Because of that loss, she became emotionally attached to my wife, who, with no family of her own and only a few friends with their own busy lives, became the surrogate daughter she never got to raise. My mother believes that if I kicked my wife out, she'd be left completely alone, which she finds unacceptable, especially in the middle of a pandemic. My mother has been pushing for a compromise, suggesting we revisit the situation in 3 or 4 months and possibly try couples counseling before I make any final decisions. Honestly, the thought of being under the same roof as my wife during Christmas makes me feel physically ill. She'll want to make everything perfect, as she does every year, and I know it'll turn into a complete disaster. My father, bless him, has always been more of a silent presence. He's never been very communicative, just quietly proud and reserved. In our household, my mother's word has always been the final authority. Some people have accused me of being selfish and spoiled because it's not technically my house and that I have no right to make demands. But now it's come down to a choice between my wife or me for my parents. If it comes to that, I'm ready to walk out and never come back. I can't stay here and maintain any self-respect. Someone has to uphold their word in this mess. If I leave, my friend has offered me a place to stay for a few weeks while I sort myself out. But if I do walk out, I'll cut off all ties with my parents. They'll probably see it as me giving up on them, as if I didn't even try to fix things. To me, it feels like they're choosing someone who shattered my heart over their own flesh and blood. What will the situation be once I'm gone? Just my wife staying in the house, with my parents taking care of her, while their own child is left to fend for himself. Here's a bit more context about the house. My parents allowed us to move in a year after our wedding, presenting it as a belated wedding gift. However, it was always their plan to move out and have us take over the house. I've poured tens of thousands into maintaining and improving it over the years, but that's irrelevant now. I often daydream about leaving all this behind, finding somewhere new and starting fresh. But I don't have any other place to go. I've lived in this town my entire life. It's all I've ever known. Am I being too harsh in all this? I'm on the verge of cutting my parents out of my life entirely, and it's tearing me apart. Why do I have to lose everything and everyone? I've always strived to be a good person and believed that good things come to those who deserve them. Maybe I'm not as good as I thought I was. Maybe I'm getting exactly what I deserve. I can't even think of that house as home anymore. When I saw on the calendar that my wife had an ophthalmologist appointment, I seized the opportunity to make my move. I knew she'd be out for a few hours, so I took that time to pack up my things and officially move out. After I got everything sorted and my belongings were out of the house, I left the house keys on the kitchen table, right next to the divorce papers my lawyer had sent me last week. It was a symbolic gesture as much as a practical one. I wanted to make a clean break. I've since blocked both my wife's and my mother's numbers, so any future communication with my soon-to-be ex will be handled through my lawyer. For now, I'm staying with a friend, but I'm hoping to secure my own rented place before the holiday season kicks in. I haven't been in touch with my parents for several weeks. The last time we spoke was through text messages. I tried to explain to my mother in detail why my wife's messages to Jacket Holder hurt so deeply. I shared how the things she said shattered my trust, particularly her comment about being good at keeping secrets. My mother's response was to say she couldn't deal with me while I was so upset and needed to cool off. A few days ago she called, but I ignored her call. And as I mentioned earlier, I've now blocked her number as well. The sense of betrayal from my parents feels almost as painful as the betrayal from my wife. When you're facing a crisis, you look to your family to be your support system, to be your rock. Instead, they've made me feel like I'm in the wrong, like I'm the one tearing the family apart. All I asked was for their support in removing my unfaithful wife from our home, and they chose to side with her. My father had a chance to step up and back me for once, but he didn't take it. I suppose we all make choices, and we all have to live with the consequences of those choices. People have criticized me for giving up too easily, saying I must have been looking for a way out and didn't truly love my wife because I didn't fight harder for the relationship. That's simply not true. I loved my wife deeply, more than anyone else ever could. Her betrayal broke me in ways I never thought possible. We all have limits, and once those boundaries are crossed, things change irrevocably. It felt like a spell was broken when I read those texts. I fell out of love with her instantly. Anything done after that would have just been delaying the inevitable end. I'm also curious about how my parents will handle things now that I'm gone. Will they continue to support my ex-wife, even though it has destroyed their relationship with their son? As for me, I've always dreamed of traveling. My wife had a deep-seated fear of flying, so our vacations were mostly confined to southern England, places like Newquay and Torquay and Cornwall and Devon. I've always wanted to explore the world beyond those familiar spots. The last time I went abroad was 13 years ago when I was 20, for a friend's holiday in Greece. Now, I'm eyeing the United States as a potential destination. Once this pandemic is under control, I'm definitely planning to explore America and see what it has to offer. The thought of starting fresh somewhere new is both exciting and terrifying, but it feels like a necessary step toward reclaiming my life. I've moved about 15 miles away from the old house, changed my phone number, and am still navigating the messy process of divorcing my wife. Unfortunately, she's been completely uncooperative with my divorce lawyer, which has been a significant roadblock. We're now working on an application for deemed service, so the court can officially serve her. And if she continues to ignore it, I'll be able to proceed with the divorce without her input. This morning, while I was at work, I received a call from my friend. He told me that my dad had been trying to reach me because my mother isn't well. I agreed to let him pass my new number on, and soon after my dad called. Hearing his voice after such a long silence was jarring. It was the most emotional I've ever heard him. He told me that my mom is in the hospital. She's stable but in poor condition. It's been a shock, especially since I haven't spoken to him in so long. My dad said that my mother really wants to see me and asked if I would meet him at the hospital tonight to visit her together. I agreed, and now I'm home, unable to focus on anything. I'm climbing the walls with anxiety, second-guessing my decision to go, and wondering if I'm about to get dragged back into the mess I tried so hard to escape. I feel like I'm walking into a burning building blindfolded, with no idea where the exits are. The uncertainty is overwhelming. Why does she want to see me now? Has she had a change of heart? It seems unlikely given how things have been. Will my wife be there too? The thought of seeing her again is distressing, and I have no interest in crossing paths with her. I'm still seething about how my parents took my wife's side over mine, and it's been hard to shake off the anger and betrayal. I've been going back and forth in my mind about whether or not to go, but I've decided that I will. I even considered asking if my mother would prefer to talk on the phone instead, but I'm not sure if she's well enough or if she would even agree to that. Right now, I feel like the bad guy, as if my decision to leave might have somehow contributed to my mother's situation. The guilt is gnawing at me, and I'm struggling to reconcile my feelings of anger and betrayal with the natural concern I have for my mother. I hope that seeing her won't pull me back into the mess with my wife, and that I can find some clarity in this chaotic situation. So I did end up going to the hospital on Wednesday night after a lot of back and forth. I was on the brink of backing out at the last minute. My nerves were frayed, and I felt like I was about to collapse under the weight of it all. But deep down, I knew I needed closure. I needed to face this head on, knowing that if I didn't go and something happened to my mother, I'd never forgive myself. As I drove into the hospital car park, a surreal sense of paranoia enveloped me. My mind raced with irrational fears, half expecting my wife to appear from behind a bush or something equally absurd. It was a bizarre, almost cinematic feeling, like I was in some kind of twisted drama where the script was still being written. I met my dad at the entrance, and the interaction was awkward from the start. He reached out for a hug, and I stiffened, declining the gesture. I made it very clear that if my wife was anywhere nearby, I would walk right out the door. Dad assured me she wasn't around, and we proceeded to the ward where Mum was. Seeing my mother was a shock to my system. I'd never seen her look so frail and vulnerable. Her face was a canvas of bruises, an intense black eye, patches of yellow and purple, and a discolored area down one side of her face. The fall had been severe. She broke 2 ribs, shattered her elbow, and hit her head and face on the ground in that order. She looked almost zombified, with a vacant expression that made my heart ache. When she saw me, a flicker of recognition and relief crossed her face. Despite her condition, she managed a weak smile and expressed how much she had missed me. She said she wasn't sure if she'd ever see me again, and that broke something inside me. I told her if she really wanted to get in touch, she could have done so more effectively. We spoke briefly about the incident, how she had been down for hours before Dad found her, and how she was determined to recover and mend things with me. I brought up my wife and the ongoing divorce process. I told her that my wife seemed to be ignoring the letters or not receiving them. I asked if she was still in the house. Mom admitted she was, and I saw Dad's discomfort growing. I looked away, feeling a wave of disgust. Mom began talking about how lost my wife was without me, how she wasn't coping well. It became clear that Mom's desire was for things to return to their previous state. She wasn't looking for a new perspective or understanding the gravity of the situation. She just wanted the status quo back. When she said that the house was my home, and always would be, I told her it no longer meant anything to me. To me, it was just a place filled with painful memories. I stayed for less than an hour. When I left, I told Mom that if I wanted to get in touch, I would, but not to expect me to call anytime soon. Dad walked me out and asked if I would keep in touch with him. I said I would, but I wasn't sure if that was the right choice. Only time will tell. When I got home, my emotions were a whirlwind. Sadness, anger, confusion. I'm glad I went, though. I couldn't stop thinking about my wife and the life we had together, and it's a pain that I know will never fully disappear. Looking back on the past 7 months, it almost feels like a nightmare I can't wake up from. The speed at which everything unraveled was breathtaking, almost as if my entire world collapsed in a matter of moments. Life had come at me fast, and I was unprepared. It was sheer luck, cosmic coincidence, that I discovered her infidelity. I didn't see the signs or piece things together. It was just one moment of clarity that shattered my life. I know now that it wasn't an isolated incident. Deep down, I can feel that. I see her for what she is now, and all I feel for her is contempt. It's as though she stole the best years of my life. And now, The good memories we shared feel tainted and distant, like they belong to someone else's existence. My friend's suggestion to see a therapist resonates with me. He's concerned that this experience will fundamentally change who I am and how I approach relationships in the future. I think he's right. The past 6 months have been the most challenging of my life, but I'm grateful for the clarity, even if it came in the harshest way possible. It's a bitter pill to swallow, but I'm learning from it. I've come to appreciate the value of loyalty in a way I never fully did before. It's a trait you don't often think about until you're confronted with disloyalty. Now, more than ever, I understand its significance and how undervalued it often is. Firstly, I'm nearing the end of the divorce process for my wife. The fact that she has signed the divorce papers means we're almost done with the legal formalities. It's a surreal feeling to be so close to closing this chapter of my life. My emotions are a complex mix of relief and residual sadness. The message she sent through my dad, apologizing for not letting me move on sooner and acknowledging that she couldn't fix what was broken, was a significant moment. It felt like a final acknowledgement of the reality I've been facing, even if it came a bit late. I'm glad she's decided to move on for her own well-being. She's expressed that she doesn't want anything from the divorce settlement and intends to leave the house once she's back on her feet. I appreciate her willingness to keep things amicable, and it's a relief to have one less thing to worry about. As for my mother, I haven't had a direct conversation with her yet, but my dad has kept me updated on her progress. She's been out of the hospital for a few days now and is gradually regaining her strength. It's been a difficult time seeing her so frail and injured. She had a serious fall, resulting in a black eye, bruised ribs, and a shattered elbow. The physical trauma is severe, and the emotional impact on both her and my father has been substantial. I've been told she's starting to get back to some semblance of normalcy, but the emotional distance between us remains a significant obstacle. I've communicated to my dad that if the house is to be officially transferred into my name, I need this process to start now. This is crucial for me to feel secure and to create a stable foundation for moving forward with my life. Once that's sorted, I'm open to discussing the possibility of mending our relationship, but it will take time and effort on both sides. The hurt and betrayal are still fresh, and while I'm willing to consider rebuilding bridges, it's not something that will happen overnight. The most challenging aspect of this entire ordeal is the internal struggle to heal and move on. Our minds are incredibly intricate and can be both a source of comfort and torment. For instance, I still vividly remember the taste of truffles I had as a child, even though it was a negative experience, throwing up after eating them and never touching them again. This vivid memory, despite the passage of time, is a reminder of how our past experiences can linger long after they've ended. I don't want this recent period of pain and betrayal to be a permanent scar on my psyche. I'm determined not to become one of those individuals whose past experiences overshadow their present and future. I've witnessed people who, due to life's cruelties, become hardened and bitter, and I'm resolute in avoiding that fate. I need to process and release this pain to prevent it from consuming me and defining who I become in the future. I've begun therapy, both through phone sessions and in-person meetings, and it's been incredibly beneficial. The act of speaking openly about my experiences and feelings has provided me with a sense of relief and clarity. During one of these sessions, my psychiatrist offered a perspective that resonated deeply with me. When I lamented about how I felt my best years were behind me, she responded with a powerful insight. Your best years are the years you've got left. This phrase has become a beacon of hope for me. It's a reminder that while the past has shaped me, it doesn't have to dictate my future. The present and future hold the potential for new experiences, growth, and happiness. This mindset is something I plan to hold on to, especially during moments of doubt and sadness. On a brighter note, I'm finally taking steps to pursue one of my long-standing dreams, traveling. My friend has agreed to accompany me, and we've booked a flight to New York at the beginning of October. This trip has been on my bucket list for years, and I'm thrilled about the prospect of experiencing the city during the fall. The idea of exploring New York amidst the changing leaves and the vibrant energy of autumn feels like the perfect antidote to the turbulence I've been through. It represents a new beginning, and I hope this trip is just the start of many more adventures. I'm eager to fill my late 30s with travel and new experiences, creating a rich tapestry of memories from around the world. For the first time in a long while, I'm waking up with a renewed sense of hope and optimism. It's a small but significant sign of progress, and I'm ready to embrace whatever comes next with a sense of excitement and possibility.